In the spring of 1992, I was 15. I was at my friend Dan's house with some other friends named Ken and Marley. Dan had a big backyard, but most of it was forest. Luckily, he knew the place pretty well and took us for a walk. Dan was leading the way, about 15 feet ahead of us, while I was with Marley, and Ken was about 5 feet behind us. He told us that we could stop somewhere and have some grub. Ken had brought some Reese's Pieces and some trail mix. As we walked, we saw a playground. It was about 35 feet ahead of me, but Dan was closer. It was very gloomy, and in fact, it was pretty depressing, not just the chipping paint, the pine cones, and the trees around it, but the way it was set up. It was very depressing. It wasn't organized like a normal playground. The jungle gym was off to the side with a not-so-merry-go-round in the center. The reason I say that is because the damn thing was on a complete slant. It could not be, for the love of God, spun. And a few springy animals that you rock back and forth on. Anyway, Dan had had a seat on the plastic border of the playground. Right as he called to us to have a seat, I started to notice that he had lost some color. Mainly in his face, but it was noticeable in other places too, like his arms. Then when you stepped over the plastic ring into the playground, you'd start to feel a bit cold, and you'd go pale. I assumed it was due to the fact that the wind had a direct entrance through the top of the tree line to the playground, and the paleness was just a byproduct of the cold wind. And then another thing I noticed after a bit is there's no really direct entrance to the playground. No pathway or any sign of human evidence that would use it. We were all sitting down eating our Reese's Pieces, and I got up to explore the playground a bit. I wish I had never done that, because what I saw was just plain disturbing. There were those springy animals with frowns and X's on their eyes, implying that they're dead. The thing is, it looked as if they were painted over. The next thing was the merry-go-round. Again, terribly built, but there were chalk drawings on the base plate that depicted things like beheading, mostly drawings of babies and children, dismemberment, and total mutilation. But these drawings looked as if they were drawn by 3-year-olds, not teenagers or some psycho in his 40s. The last, most horrifying thing I'd ever seen was the yellow slide. It had been deformed as if heated up with a lighter, and in perfect rows there were X-Acto knife blades pushed up through the melted slide. Perhaps the most horrifying thing was that there were burgundy stains, perhaps dried blood on the knives. The slide was covered in dried blood too, and at the bottom of the slide there were blood stains and bloody footprints, leading back to the ladder on the jungle gym and back down the slide. All these footprints were repeated, as if this had been done more than once. The shoe prints were all the exact same. And on the other side of the slide, there was written in blood, "Repeat, repeat, repeat. Pay your price in flesh and blood." We left that place running back to Dan's house faster than anyone could have imagined. We never in our lives told our parents. Most of all, never mentioned that place to anyone. No police, no kids at school, not even my wife. I'd forgotten about it up until last week when I turned on Fox News. It said they found 2 dead kids in the kitchen in South Carolina, one 4, the other 2, whom had, from what their evidence had told them, repeatedly used a food blender to mutilate their arms and legs. And written on the wall in their blood was, "Repeat, repeat, repeat, back for more." A further investigation showed that the blood smeared on the wall had a fingerprint. The fingerprint was of a man named Derry Reynolds, They had said that they had been looking for him. He was our religion teacher in high school. He had taught all of us the same year, and he had always tried to tell us not to visit the Tire Man Sanctuary. Specifically, to Dan, for some reason, and I never used to know what it meant. Lots of other people assumed it was a scary joke, or he was just losing his marbles. It's starting to make sense now, and I'm starting to think that the Tire Man Sanctuary was that playground. During the spring of 1992, he disappeared. I tried to contact Dan, but it turns out he had been captured by insurgents in Iraq and hadn't been heard from. He was presumed dead, though they thought they had executed him or something. But they say 2 years ago there were rumors about him killing himself in the prison he was held captive in, repeatedly banging his head on the wall with hard-hitting force until he had cracked his skull and gouged as much of his own brains out as he possibly could before he died on the spot. Something similar happened to Ken and Marley, too. Turns out they had gotten together, and Ken reminded Marley about that day in the forest. When he had brought it up, Marley had started apparently saying, "Repeat, repeat, repeat," and continued to gouge out her own eyes and smashed Ken with a lamp in the living room, killing him. This case was called the Blind Marley murder trial. Marley had to have surgery, but could not get her vision back. She was killed during the trial when she started screaming, "Repeat, repeat, repeat," and tried to rip out her lawyer's throat. Only partly accomplished. She was shot in the neck by a guard at the trial and was still standing, choking on the bullet, and was shot 3 times in the head and collapsed. Moral of the story is, don't go in the playground in the forest behind Dan's house, under any circumstance. No exceptions. Don't know where it is? Good. Now, it's been 20 years since then. It's spring and I've been filing my nails every day now. I draw blood too much and I've already lost 1 finger for good. My doctor thinks I have some sort of obsessive compulsive disorder, but it's not that I can't stop. I have to do it. I need to. I must pay flesh and blood. I must repeat.